We might need to put that on the thumbnail. Actually, we probably will.
Yeah, I think we probably should this week. Hello, I'm Colin,
And I'm Charlie.
and welcome to the C&C Talks podcast, season 3, episode 28. And Charlie, our final episode before the 2024 election. I believe this is going to be coming out election day morning.
Yeah, and we will actually have a special stream on the morning after election day. Just a reminder, we release episodes every week. We talk about politics, world events, and sports. As of taping this, it is Sunday, November 3rd, 2024 at about 6:15 p.m. Pacific time. Without further ado, let's get right into it.
Yeah, I think, Charlie, as you would probably expect, the bulk of our politics section this week is
Well,
going to
isn't it
be
all of it?
almost all. I think we have one story about something unrelated, but the bulk of it is going to be election related for obvious reasons. We're going to start with just a quick preview of election night, what to expect on election night. But before we talk about that, if you have not voted yet, you should probably get on that. We at C&C Talks encourage everybody to cast a vote to make your voice heard in the American democratic process. However, whatever that may be, we certainly have our own feelings, but however you vote, it is important that you cast your vote. Go to iwillvote.com to figure out where and when you can vote to make so that you can best make a plan to have your voice heard. And you have just a day left to vote now, as of when this episode is coming out in the morning of election day. And let's talk a little bit about when some of these polls close, Charlie. But before we do that, just a reminder, if you are in line when the polls close in your state, and we'll repeat this later too, if you are in line to vote when the polls close, stay in line. They are legally required to allow you to vote, Charlie.
Yes, and I know this is probably going to be said several times in this episode, but even if you are in a state that is very likely to be won by a candidate by a large margin, your vote still counts and still matters. So even if you're in a state like California or a state like Wyoming, still get out and vote. No matter who you vote for, get out and
Yeah,
vote.
and also remember, the presidential race is not the only race on the ballot.
No,
There
there
are
are
Senate
so many
races in a
local
bunch of
races,
states.
and those local races
Yeah,
have an impact.
yeah, Senate races, governor's races in a handful of states. All the House districts are up. Even if you're in a non-competitive state, you might be in a swing congressional district. And then, like you said, local races. A bunch of state legislatures have races this year. A whole bunch of ballot measures across the country that could be very close that you should make your voice heard on. A whole bunch of other local races, whatever they may be around the country. It's important that your voice is heard in all of them. So, kind of a roadmap to follow on election night. 6 p.m. Eastern time is when the first polls close in the country. You're not going to hear any calls in the presidential race at this time because it's only the eastern half of two states of Indiana and Kentucky, just the parts of those states that are in the eastern time zones. But you are in that 6 p.m. Eastern hour. You're going to get looks at real votes. This will really be the first real votes you see, unless, I guess, if you count Dixville Notch up in New Hampshire. I think we'll get those results very early on election day, like just at past midnight Eastern time. But then 7 p.m. Eastern time, this, Charlie, is really when the fun or chaos or anxiety or whatever you want to call it, this is when that starts. Full poll closings in Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, Virginia, and Vermont, but then as well as Georgia. Polls will close in Georgia. You're going to start to get results from the state of Georgia in that hour. And Georgia, I think, is one of the states that could be fairly quick to count their votes. I think there's a really good chance that we get a call in Georgia at some point, probably late into the night on election night, though. And then 7 p.m. Eastern Time, also when the majority of the state of Florida closes, everything except the Florida Panhandle. Florida may be the quickest state to count their votes due to the laws around counting votes in the state of Florida. Charlie, we talked about this a little bit on last week's election preview episode, but this is important. Don't take too seriously the results in Florida. Trump could win Florida by a point. Trump could win Florida by 30 points. It really doesn't matter in terms of what the rest of the country is going to do. Obviously, historically known as a swing state, but we saw in 2022, Democrats won statewide races on major seats, Senate seats or governor's races in Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Ron DeSantis won Florida by 20 points. So it really doesn't say that much about the rest of the country, even if, Charlie, it's so easy to overreact to.
Yeah, it really can be. But you put the point very well that no matter where Florida goes, it's very likely going to stay with the Republicans and won't really have too big of an impact. I think another example the other way would be like if Harris only wins California by 10 or 8.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be slightly more concerning because it does, well, first of all, there's a ton of competitive House races in California, but also I feel like with Florida, it feels like Florida just exists in a vacuum in a way compared to the rest of the country in a way that really I feel like no other
In a
state
lot of
does
ways,
completely.
it does. In a lot of ways, it does.
Yeah. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, another crucial swing state. The polls close in North Carolina. We'll start to get results. I think most of the results in North Carolina, I think we'll get on election night, but some of them may take a couple of days. Ohio, crucial Senate race in Ohio. We could see that race, some results coming in fairly early in that Senate race, and then West Virginia also closing at 7:30. Then 8 p.m. Eastern Time, this is when things really get wild. A lot of states have poll closings. Alabama, Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, parts of Kansas, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Missouri, New Hampshire. Interesting governor's race there. Could be interesting at the presidential level. Unlikely to flip to Trump, but the numbers might tell us something. New Jersey, parts of both Dakotas, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, Tennessee, part of Texas. There's that interesting Senate race there. D.C. polls closed there. But then also at that hour, polls closing in several key swing areas. First, we'll get complete results from Florida. The Panhandle will close there. Not really a swing state, but we will get complete results at that point. Pennsylvania polls will close statewide at this point, and then the majority of the state of Michigan also closing their polls at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So
For Michigan, I'm assuming the part that doesn't close is the Upper Peninsula.
yeah, I believe so. So interesting results going to be coming in that hour. We should get results from Michigan at that time. Pennsylvania could take a little while to count their votes. I don't think that it's going to take as long as it did in 2020, but still probably a couple days. Obviously, when we'll get a call there depends on just how close that race actually is. But this is another state where you just have to remember back to 2020. Trump took I believe it was a several 100,000 vote lead in Pennsylvania. And then Biden with the mail-in ballots coming in, that lead was eaten into. I don't think there's going to be quite as big of a discrepancy between how Republicans vote versus how Democrats vote in this election, but it still definitely exists. So do not be at all surprised if you see Trump take a lead, possibly a big lead, in the early hours of election night in Pennsylvania. Just remember in Pennsylvania, the votes that are counted last tend to be the most Democratic votes in that state.
So essentially what you're saying with Pennsylvania is very likely Trump will have a lead in the dying stages. The question is, Harris will catch up. The question is how much.
Exactly. Can she close that gap enough to be able to overtake Trump in the state? 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we have polls closing in Arkansas. Not really much interesting happening in Arkansas. No major races that will have a huge national impact in that state. 9 p.m. Eastern Time, all of Arizona will close. We won't see results in Arizona likely for an entire another hour after that, but polls will close there. Polls will close across the state in Michigan, so polls will be fully closed there. Polls will close in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's one I think we could see full results in the the wee hours of Wednesday morning. I would say this is another state. It's not. I don't think it's going to be as drastic, but I think we'll see a Trump lead there, and then we should get a whole ton of mail ballots in the wee hours of Wednesday morning. That could possibly flip the state to Harris, or at least cut
And
into that
Colin,
Trump
we'll be
lead.
up watching that.
Yes, exactly. Texas, states will close across the state, and polls will close across the state of Texas, and then polls also closing in at that time in both of the Dakotas, the entire state, New York, a ton of House races there that are interesting. Wyoming, New Mexico,
And most
Nebraska,
of those,
obviously that interesting second congressional district,
yes, except for that second
Minnesota,
district, most of those,
Louisiana, Kansas, Colorado, and then Iowa, which we'll talk about a bit later.
yes, and for most of those, bar that second district in Nebraska and Iowa, which we'll get to in a minute, none of those nationally for the presidential race are particularly going to be close. Texas might be somewhat close, but definitely going to go Republican. California, no doubt for the Democrats.
Yeah, the only question with Texas, I feel like, is really that Senate race.
Yes, is Colin Allred and Ted Cruz. But that section there will be very important for the local races, the Senate races, the House of Representative races. But nationally, for the presidential race, most of those will be called immediately after the polls close.
Yeah, like the state of New York, for example, ton of competitive House races in the state, just how the map is drawn. So while it may not be interesting at the presidential race, definitely stuff to watch there. Definitely still plenty of reason to get out and vote. 10 p.m. Eastern Time, polls will close in parts of Idaho and Oregon, as well as Montana. Interesting Senate race there. Charlie, we both think Tester's toast, but I guess we'll see.
Yes, unfortunately, Montana has just changed too much for him
Yeah.
to be competitive. And as we've said, I think before, that is not his fault. It's just an
Yeah.
unfortunate situation for him. But that is a very huge pickup for the Republicans. They needed to win that seat back, and it's looking very likely that they will.
Polls also closing at that hour in Utah, and then in the crucial swing state of Nevada. Now, Charlie, in terms of seeing results in the state of Nevada, we're going to be waiting a while. Why? Because in Nevada, there's a rule that they cannot start posting results until every single person in the state has voted. Again, if you're in line when polls close and you stay in line, they have to let you vote. So they have to get through all of those lines before we actually start seeing results from Nevada. I believe it was something like 12:30 a.m. Eastern Time in 2022 that we got our first results from the state of Nevada. So we may be waiting a while. And then Nevada, as well as Arizona, at least in 2022 and 2020, it took them a while to figure out their vote counting. If that continues, which I think there's a good chance it does, if those states end up being decisive in the election, then we could be waiting a while. And their system for how they report out votes, it's kind of nonsensical. They don't trickle in. We just randomly at these random times, the big chunks come updated into the system. So it'll be a while in those states.
Just to briefly mention before we move on, because we do have to move on, it just for these states like Arizona, these swing states in particular, I think it is very crucial for them this election cycle to get those ballots counted and get those results out as fast as they can. The longer they wait on this, the easier it will be for people to come up with reasons to explain why one side or the other lost.
Yeah.
It is very important that the process is fast, but still reliable and still accurate. Because at this point, with the way this country is, we cannot afford another repeat of the last election.
Yeah, that kind of does it for the swing states at the presidential level. But just to quickly go over the other poll closings, 11 p.m. Eastern, polls closing in Idaho, California, Oregon, and Washington. 12 a.m. Eastern Time, parts of Alaska and all of Hawaii, and then 1 a.m. Eastern Time in the rest of Alaska. Now, There are some interesting House races. One in Alaska, definitely an interesting one in Washington. I think a couple interesting ones in Oregon, and then a handful in California, which we could be waiting weeks on, to be honest, for the results of those House races. But
Because California is infamously slow.
yeah, they give states several weeks to count the ballots. I think they give counties several weeks to count the ballots. I think most counties will sometimes take like up to 2 weeks. It's slow.
And if you're wondering why that is, the answer is very simple. It is California is very large.
Yeah, it's a big state. All right, that's kind of our election night preview. Now, I think we should move on to Charlie. We alluded to it. There's this Iowa poll. Now, we've said here, don't put too much faith in polls, and we still agree with that here at C&C
Yes,
Talks.
but we do have an interesting one.
Yeah,
Because
so
a very reliable poll, I'll let Colin explain more of this, a very reliable poll is throwing up a result that no other poll is throwing up. And if
yeah.
Iowa does go the way this poll does, it could entirely change this election. Colin, why don't you explain a bit more?
Yeah, so this was a highly anticipated poll. Why? Because it's the Des Moines Register poll run by Ann Seltzer, who's been polling Iowa for a long time. She is the best pollster in the country. Single best reputation of any pollster in the country. Why? Because election after election, she gets it right. She comes up with these results that are oftentimes unexpected and aren't captured by really any other polls, such as 2016. She captured that late break for Trump that nobody else really saw. 2020, when a lot of people saw Biden having a slight edge in Iowa, she put up, I think it was like a Trump +7 poll in the state. That no one else really saw this. But then time after time, she's right. That's why she has this amazing reputation. Why when she puts out her final poll every election, people listen. And that's why it was confusing to a lot of people, Charlie, when the poll this time was Harris +3 in Iowa.
That's a surprise. Every other poll had Trump +3, Trump +6, Trump +10. And now
Yeah.
Harris +3.
Trump won
And
Iowa by
if
like 8
that
or 9
poll
points in 2020.
And if that poll is right, that is an absolute disaster for Donald Trump, and that costs him the election.
Yeah,
And
Donald Trump.
if Donald Trump loses Iowa, he loses the race.
Yeah,
Now,
so I mean, I think it's more than just that, right? Iowa, it only has 6 electoral votes. He can't really afford to lose it, but like if Iowa just existed in the vacuum, then it might be okay for him. Losing those 6 electoral votes if this poll this year is accurate. The problem is that it doesn't exist in a vacuum. And if you look at some of the other numbers in the poll, it has Harris, I believe, winning women in the state by like 20 points or something. This is a heavily white state. If Harris is up by massive margins with white women, it has her up a lot among elderly women. I think even more than that. That could be devastating for Trump in other areas such as Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, other states that are demographically somewhat similar to the state of Iowa, other Midwest states.
Yeah, these other Midwest states that have somewhat similar demographics. If the polls are showing this, Harris +3 in a state where everyone thought Trump would win, what does that mean for Michigan? What does that mean for Wisconsin? What does that mean for even states like Indiana and Ohio, which obviously are very likely to still go Republican, but if they're not going by Republican by that much, that again bodes horrible news for Trump's chances to win the election.
This doesn't necessarily mean that Trump will win Iowa. That Harris will win Iowa. I'll get into more about how much we should trust this poll in a minute. But what I would say is, let's pretend that this poll is wrong. Let's pretend that this poll is wrong by 1 point more than Ann Seltzer has ever been wrong in an Iowa poll in 30 years. Okay? Then Trump is still underperforming his 2020 margin in the state of Iowa by several points.
if it is off by that, what does he win Iowa by?
I think it's like 4 points or something, which is still
Which
significantly less
isn't
than,
a great margin.
yeah, like, remember, this results for an election that overall Trump lost. He needs to be building support. And states, except for maybe Florida, don't typically exist in a vacuum, right? Those trends can be seen elsewhere, especially if it's in regards to specific demographics.
Yeah,
And
again,
as for
Florida
reasons,
is kind of its own thing. It just historically has been.
yeah, and as for reasons why we should trust this poll, like, sure, we can say, oh, this is super shocking, it's just an outlier, nobody saw this coming, but that's kind of the whole point. That's typically what Ann Seltzer's polls look like. But then she ends up being right. So, could this just be wrong? Sure, but it could also just be right. And the other thing, Democrats have been very strongly making a play for Nebraska's second congressional district in a way that Trump hasn't, because it is crucial to their plan to win the election through the blue wall states. So they've really been spending a lot of ad money in Nebraska's second congressional district. You know what else is included in that media market in Omaha? Large portions of the state of Iowa. So a lot of those ads, those pro-Harris ads in the place that Trump isn't playing ads, are being seen in Iowa. Iowa has an abortion ban that's gone into effect. That could potentially be a factor for why especially women, and possibly especially elderly women, are voting or are being shown as voting for Democrats in such large margins. So
And
it's
just something
possible that this could be accurate.
yes, and something that we didn't mention in the segment, just the preview, that we very likely should have, was the fact that abortion is on the ballot in 10 states this election cycle.
Yeah, directly. And then the other aspect of this is that there's a couple House races in Iowa that are like supposed to be two of the closest in the country, currently held by Republicans. So if this poll's even close to right, that could spell disaster for Republicans in those two House seats. So there's just layers on top of layers of this. And then there's also a poll by one of the more reliable pollsters in Kansas that shows Trump only winning the state by 5. That would seem to be consistent with the Iowa poll, just based on how Iowa and Kansas typically vote in relation to each other. So there's real reasons to believe that this poll could be accurate. And if it is accurate, Charlie, if we take it as being accurate, that really throws away every other narrative that we have about this election.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if that ends up being correct, then this election's being called by midnight Eastern time on election night.
Yes, it's not going to be particularly close. The question is, though, as we've brought up before, do we trust it?
Yeah. There's lots of reasons why you should trust it. At the same time, it's always possible that she produced an outlier poll that's just not gonna happen in that way. It's entirely possible that she's just completely wrong here in a way that she never has been before. But even if she's wrong by as much as her worst polls before, again, that's still probably bad news for Donald Trump.
All right, let's move on now.
Yep, let's talk about that MSG rally that Trump held this past weekend.
And the fallout from it as well, because that we're still seeing the impacts of that.
Charlie, that was one of the worst things I've ever seen. That was the 1939 Nazi rally at MSG Part 2.
Yes, it was a disaster for Trump politically, but saved by a little bit by comments that Biden made on it the next day, which were blown up as well, and really, in some ways, overshadowed the actual event itself. But Colin, let's get to that event at MSG first. What were some of the notable things that happened?
So it was a lot. And again, this might be intentional. Like, Trump might have planned this rally because he knows about the 1939 Nazi rally there, and he kind of wanted to do that himself. I don't know what the reason was behind it. All I can tell you is that it felt a lot like that rally. Right off the top, comedian Tony Hinchcliffe was there, and he made jokes, well, quote unquote jokes about uh, Puerto Rico being a floating island of garbage. We saw comments at this rally from Stephen Miller, Trump's top person on immigration, saying America is for Americans and Americans only. That is very much rhetoric that echoes the statements of Adolf Hitler. I saw comments calling Harris the devil and the Antichrist, calling Democrats scum, Jew haters, a whole bunch of really, really nasty things, comments dehumanizing immigrants, dehumanizing political opponents. It was really one of the worst things I've ever seen. And a lot of that was from the speakers leading up to Trump. But then
This is
like
before we
Trump
even
still
get to
went out
this.
on that stage. He hasn't condemned any of that. Like he owns this.
Yeah, he really did. And then let's talk about some of the fallout because the next day, Biden makes a comment on what had happened the previous night, and the story gets blown up that he is essentially called Trump supporters garbage.
Garbage. Yeah,
And then
he
later
was
that
trying. It
day,
was very clear if you watch the clip that he was trying to call Tony Hinchcliffe garbage. I also don't think that it's wise to let Joe Biden near a microphone in the lead up to an election.
yes, and then later that day, Trump shows up to a rally in Wisconsin with a garbage truck. Real
Yeah.
quick, and
What was that?
I'm not sure. And I think one of the questions we'll get into the ramifications of this, but just a quick question for you. How did he get a garbage truck that fast?
I think it was the next day. I'm not entirely sure, but regardless, I don't know. I mean, he's
I mean,
a former
that's
president and
impressive.
presidential candidate. He can get whatever he wants for the most part. I'm not saying his advanced team is good, but they're at least capable of doing that for him. Uh, I'm just gonna say it, he looked like a traffic cone in that orange vest with the orange
Yes,
makeup on.
there is that great image of him.
Yeah,
We
great is
actually
one word for it.
yes, well
Um,
actually we might need to put that on the thumbnail actually. We probably will.
yeah, I think we probably should this week. But
You'll see, if you haven't seen the image yet, you will see what we're talking about.
it's dumb. It's really dumb. And again, I think that the story about the fallout though, it's less about that. It's more about this seems to be having an impact in a way that a lot of the things that Trump himself says haven't, especially with the Latino community. The There's like 500,000 Puerto Ricans that live in Pennsylvania.
Given how close that race is, 500,000 votes is more than enough to flip the state.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not the closing message is not going well for the Trump campaign. And just let's quickly talk about some other things that have gone on with in terms of the Trump closing message. He has said that he's going to be the protector of women, whether they want him to or not, which sounds not good.
No, it really doesn't sound good. And for someone who already wasn't polling great with women, a comment like that is really not going to help you because that comment
Yeah.
sounds very similar to comments made by Iran.
Yeah, he says he's going to put RFK Jr. in charge of health, including women's health. Comments from RFK recently about banning vaccines and banning fluoride in water. This is not good stuff. But apparently this is the closing message. He appeared to try to have oral sex with his microphone, Charlie.
Colin, I'm going to stay out of this segment. You go ahead.
Yeah, that's something that actually happened. You heard me right. I know when I started doing this podcast, I didn't think that that's the type of stuff I'd be talking about either, but that's apparently the political climate that we're living in. He um appeared to agree with a comment that a supporter yelled at one of his rallies when essentially calling Kamala Harris a prostitute, and then has said that Liz Cheney should be put in front of a firing squad, and that he wouldn't mind if somebody shoots the media at his rallies. What is
Okay,
this?
well, good to know. In the future, never attend one of those, Colin.
Yeah, like seriously, what is this? Are we pretending that this is normal rhetoric in this country? Like it, I don't care if it becomes normal. That's like that alone is a problem if it's become normal. Like we cannot treat this as normal rhetoric. This is explicitly fascist rhetoric and threats, serious threats of violence, to be completely honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this cannot be normalized, and it is being normalized.
Exactly. So that's the closing message on the Republican side. Kamala Harris has given a very different closing message, actually staying focused on policy. As you could see at her speech at the Ellipse this last Tuesday. So a very clear contrast between how the two campaigns are spending the last week, what their final message to voters is. Now, Charlie, last week we did see an article about Donald Trump liking Hitler, saying that he wished that he had generals like Hitler's generals. That's also not good and should be disqualifying.
Yes, it really should. Given, who the German generals in World War II were working for,
Yeah,
though talking about their quality is a different thing, because in general, in terms of military tactics, the generals were quite good. But if you're part of an organization that's fighting for the Nazis, and someone in a democratic institution is suggesting that they would like to have generals like that, generally not a good thing.
yeah. And now, when we're seeing people on the right being completely outraged that people are comparing Trump to Hitler or calling him a Nazi, look, here's the facts, right? When he wants to have Hitler's generals, when his own chief of staff says that he admires Hitler, when his own running mate has previously called him America's Hitler, I feel like it's completely fair game to say that he's a Nazi.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. All right,
Moving on from that, Charlie, we
let's move on.
saw in our home state of Washington, in
And in Portland as
southwestern
well,
Washington,
I believe.
and in Oregon, we saw ballot boxes set on fire.
Yes, and I believe that they still have not caught the guy who has done that. This happened last week, and replacement ballots have been sent out to those people who had their ballots destroyed, or the ballots that were not repairable or readable anymore. As
Yeah,
I said, I do not believe that they have found the guy who has done this, but there's a lot of rumors given this event, which side of the political aisle he's on. But my question is, does it really matter? Because no matter who did this, it is still a horrible thing.
yeah. No, it doesn't matter. It's not really good. Oh, sorry. It's still a horrible thing. It's not really going to affect the presidential election, but it is going to have an impact on potentially a House race
This is
in
in District
South
3, which is one of the most
yeah
competitive in the
the
state
country.
and one of the most competitive in the country.
Yeah, so like that's still relevant, but I think the broader takeaway is regardless of whether it actually is going to affect who wins, this cannot become a norm in American politics. This straight up, just plain and simple, this is domestic terrorism.
Yes, it is.
Firebombing ballot boxes is one of the least patriotic, one of the least democratic things that you could do in this country.
Yes,
It
and the fact that we
cannot
have to
become a
clarify
common thing.
that is a problem.
Yeah, exactly. This is I mean, I wish I could say I was surprised, but the fact that this is happening now is honestly, it's become unsurprising. After all of this, Charlie, there's a major newspaper, the Washington Post, that still will not make an endorsement in this presidential race.
Yes,
Now,
and
we can
Washington
debate.
Post, owned by Jeff Bezos,
Yep.
which obviously is significant. And since they've made this announcement that they won't give an endorsement, their numbers and their subscriptions have taken a big hit. A lot of people unsubscribing from that paper because they are upset that the Washington Post will not make a statement on who they support for the election. I'll let you go ahead with what you were about to say.
Yeah, so we can have a debate, and we should have a debate on whether newspapers' editorial boards should really be endorsing a candidate, right? It could be bad optics, even though a newsroom and an editorial board are different. You could argue that the optics of it aren't great, and that's completely fair. But to make this decision, for Bezos to say we're not going to endorse anyone at the presidential level, um, like a week before the most consequential election in modern history, when the editorial board has already drawn up an endorsement in favor of Harris. They've already drafted it. is ridiculous. And apparently he's done this because he's worried of retaliation from Trump if Trump ends up winning. That would seem to me that might not just be limited to the editorial board, but say that Trump wins, would you, based on Bezos doing what he did, would you have true confidence that the newsroom at the Washington Post would be given the ability to fully report on Trump in the way that they need to? Because it feels to me like Bezos might not allow them to do that if Trump's elected,
Yes,
because
and not only that, but just real quick, if it not to get our personal opinion involved in this more than it already is, but if your paper is concerned that you endorsing a candidate will cause the other candidate, if elected, to shut down your newspaper, I think that gives you a pretty evident idea of who you should endorse.
yes, exactly. And regardless, like, there's been a ton of people in the newsroom at the Washington Post. They're like, I really don't care who the editorial board endorses. We're journalists. We're just here to do our job. But for the owner to come in and say, no, you can't do this a week before the election because he's worried about personal fallout against him, possibly impacting like Amazon or Blue Origin or something, is insane.
Yes, absolutely. Should we move on to Elon Musk?
Yeah, I told you we had something unrelated to the election in here. That's now. Elon Musk has apparently since 2022 been having calls with Vladimir Putin
Huh,
while
okay.
working
Why
as
am I not surprised?
while his company has contracts with the U.S. Department of Defense.
And Starlink is supplying Ukraine with internet.
Yeah, remember that story, Charlie, from like a year or so ago? I don't remember exactly when. About how Starlink had Elon Musk had used Starlink to thwart one specific Ukrainian operation.
Yes, I do.
Well, I think we might know the reason for why now.
Yeah, I get the
And
feeling that we do.
and if that's why, is that not treason?
It very well could be.
Elon Musk is essentially, well, at least possibly, using his product that he has contract with the US government for to help an adversary of the United States that he is in close contact with the leader of. At the very least, that should mean that the US government should end all contracts with him immediately.
That would
At
make
the
sense.
worst, there should be serious legal repercussions.
Yes, at the very least, yes. And this does not bode incredibly well for the safety of the US if we are to get involved in a major conflict.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't be so reliant on Elon Musk's products. Moving on, Charlie, there's tapes of Jeffrey Epstein now that essentially have him saying that he was Donald Trump's best friend.
Okay, well, again, I don't know how surprised we should be by that.
No,
But
like there's
again,
photos of him with Epstein, but to hear
the
him say it,
more of these things come out as close to election day cannot be good for your numbers.
no. Now, Trump also suing CBS News, saying that they selectively edited that Harris 60 Minutes interview, which, by the way, they have a right to edit it however the hell they want to, because they have the right of the free press. But Trump suing them over it, calling it election interference, suing them, Charlie, for $10 billion.
Well, oh, wow, that's quite a bit.
So, right, here's the thing. I think that this is just I think he's just going to drop the suit, to be honest, after the election. This
If he
for
wins.
me is just him trying to make a point leading up to the election.
I think he is trying to make a point. I think, to your point that you made about him dropping it, I think he will if he wins.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously $10 billion is ridiculous. And really any amount of money is ridiculous in this specific lawsuit. He's not going to win it if it ends up going to trial. It's a waste, but it's absurd. Charlie, Saturday night we saw Kamala Harris make, I guess, one of her final appearances before the election. On Saturday Night Live, appearing on the program. Did you watch any of this, and if so, what were your thoughts?
Unfortunately, I did not. I did see that you did, so I will pass this one on to you to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah. I thought it was actually excellent. I mean, first of all, to have her side by side with Maya Rudolph, it showed just how good
Yes,
Maya Rudolph's
I have
impression is.
seen that clip. I have seen that clip today.
Yeah. Rudolph's impression of her is phenomenal. But really, I just thought it was a joyful appearance. They didn't get too political, which I thought was good. Like they didn't get into the weeds of policy, nor should they on the show like SNL. It was just a joyful appearance, really. I liked it quite a bit. Charlie,
And you got to think it helps on a pure numbers game perspective.
yeah.
You're in front of a national audience.
Lots of people watch Saturday Night Live, and a lot of people that watch it that may not be tuned into politics especially closely. Charlie, I think it's time for your stat of the week as we move on with the show.
All right, let's get right to it. So, the NBA season is just getting underway here. We have played less than 10 games, and we don't really have a great idea yet of where a lot of the teams in the league are going to be. But
Warriors are good, Hornets are bad.
But for teams like the Utah Jazz, who are 0-6, not a good sign. There are a couple of teams that right now have not lost. One of them being the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the other one being the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is as of Sunday night. So that brought up the question, how much longer can these teams keep their win streaks alive? And what was the longest win streak to open a season?
It's got to be the 2015 to 16 Warriors, right? Has to be.
It would be the 20. Yes. How long was that win streak?
I want to say 24 games.
And he gets it. I'm not surprised.
Yeah,
2016
I'm a
Warriors.
Warriors fan. You thought I wouldn't get that?
No, I said it would be harder than the other one. The other one was incredibly easy, but we'll talk about that later.
All right. That was Charlie's stat of the week. We move on to sports. We're going to try to keep the sports section somewhat short because we already have gone on for a while here on this episode.
Well, and Colin, one more thing about the stat of the week. I had to give you one because you almost never get it nowadays.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's talk about the World Series, Charlie.
Yep, I talked quite a bit about this on my personal channel that I got, but I predicted Yankees in 6. I don't know if we actually talked about that on the show, but predicted Yankees in 6. Obviously, Freddie Freeman with a blast walks off game 1 in what is going to become one of the most iconic moments in baseball.
Absolutely.
Dodgers go up
essentially the same thing as Kirk Gibson's homer.
Yes. Dodgers go up 3-0. Yankees try to claw back. Too little, too late. Then they absolutely implode in in the 5th inning of Game 5, and that was it.
Yeah. So let's just kind of go through this series. Game 1, it was an excellent game, just all around. Right, postseason Giancarlo
It's going to go down as an
showed up.
all-time classic game.
Yeah, postseason Giancarlo Stanton showed up, but Garrett Cole pitched pretty well. Jack Flaherty, I was actually really impressed with him for the Dodgers, and then obviously, yeah, Freeman and extras when they were down. Charlie, I have a comp for this one. It's one that's very, very painful to me, but I would love for somebody to tell me one way that this was different from Yordan Alvarez's Game 1 ALDS in 2022.
Oh, no, it is incredible.
Runners on base.
Runners
on base, bottom of the inning, losing. The team's losing. They bring in a left-handed pitcher who's usually a starter to pitch. This case, it was Nestor Cortez. 93 miles an hour, kind of down and in a little bit, and hit out to right field.
Wow, the comparisons were actually a lot more. There was actually a lot more of that comparison than I was originally thinking. I was just thinking left-handed pitcher, team down, runner on. But yeah, you're really right.
It's a mirror image. So that was Game 1. Game 2. This was the game that we had the Dodgers up big, and then the Yankees, they almost clawed back in the 9th inning, but came up short.
Yes, that is basic. Yeah, and they did almost come back, and they did almost come back again in Game 5.
Yeah, they did. Go through this. Game 3 was good, but not great. It never really felt like the Yankees had much of a shot after Freddie Freeman's 3rd homer of the series in the 1st inning of the game. Then his 4th homer of the series in Game 4 in the 1st inning, but The Dodgers after that got destroyed. And then game 5, right? Yankees got off to a great start. 5-0 after 3 innings. It was looking great. And then the 5th inning was one of the most disastrous things I've ever seen.
Yeah, but couldn't have happened to a better team than the Yankees.
Yeah. Aaron Judge just straight out dropping that ball in center field.
Yes,
Rizzo and
and
Cole not figuring out who's going to get to first base.
well, also just Judge and Ohtani. What a disastrous series for those two.
I mean, I think the thing about Ohtani that you have to keep in mind is that he was playing at least part of the series injured.
He was. That is very
So,
true.
but you're right. It was a bad series for him. Um, you got to cut him a little bit of slack, but not too much. At the end of the day, it was the Yankee defense that really imploded. It was Freddie Freeman rightfully winning the series MVP, and Charlie.
Which he absolutely deserved.
Yeah, exactly. But Charlie, at the end of the day, the Dodgers were just the best team in
Well,
MLB
they
this year.
they spent $1 billion in the offseason to make sure of that.
Well, sure, but I feel like we got to give credit where credit's due. Like they 100% deserve the championship that they just won.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah, moving on to the NFL. Charlie, we've had a couple good weeks of NFL football. We're still in the middle of week 9 as of this recording, but we did see in week 8 one of the best witching hours of all time.
Yeah, we did.
I feel like obviously when we're just going 1 week at a time, then we can kind of go game by game, but I feel like that doesn't
Did you
really
not say
work.
that you didn't want the sports section to take forever?
Exactly. Oh, I just feel like in general that won't work when because last week we did the election preview special instead of a normal episode, so we didn't get a chance to talk about it. So I feel like let's just go through the divisions. Why don't you pick a place for us to start?
Well, let's start in the division that we care the most about, the NFC West.
The Seahawks are bad.
Yes. That division is very weird.
I'm gonna make a prediction, Charlie, here actually. It's not one that I think anyone could have seen coming at the
Are you
beginning
going
of
to say
the
the
year, but
Rams are going to win the division?
it's gonna be I think that the Rams are the favorite, and that the team that's gonna come in second is the Arizona Cardinals.
It would be absolutely hilarious if the Cardinals won the division.
That would be really funny. But I don't think they win the division. I think they come in second. 49ers have just not looked great. I get that they're missing pieces. Seahawks are a disaster at the moment.
Dysfunctional.
Or what?
Dysfunctional.
Yeah, blow the whole thing up, to be honest.
Yeah, they have to.
Yeah, let's move to the NFC South. Charlie, name one good reason why the Atlanta Falcons will not win this division.
Let's see. Actually, I
There's
can't think
not
of
a
anything.
Yeah. The Atlanta Falcons have actually been really impressive to me so far
Despite
this
making
year.
one of the stupidest draft picks they possibly could have, it's worked
Which
out.
one? Oh, Penix? Yeah.
Yes.
That didn't make a ton of sense, but it's worked out. Cook Cousins has been good. And then the rest of the division, I mean, the Panthers and the Saints are a disaster.
Those two are going to be battling for who gets the number 1 pick for a while.
Derek Carr has now lost to 31 different teams in his career.
Has he played the Raiders yet?
I don't know.
Okay. Because I can't wait for him to play the Raiders, lose to the Raiders, and then lose to all 32 teams.
Yeah. I'm assuming that it's the Raiders that are the 32nd team, but I guess I couldn't swear by that.
I think it has to be, no?
Yeah, probably does. Tampa Bay they're not as good as I thought they'd be. Like I thought this division was better than it has been in past years, except for the Panthers heading into the season. I thought that we'd get a division winner that like has 10 wins, and I still think we could get that, but I thought that the Buccaneers make more of a run. And if you look at their schedule the rest of the way, like there's definitely places where like they could win games, but there's some tough games on there too. So I don't know what to make of this team.
Yeah, no, this division as a whole is very weird. The Buccaneers and the Falcons both could very well win this division. It's just which one of them, Falcons or Buccaneers, first.
Yeah, but the other argument though that I could make in favor of the Buccaneers, Charlie, this is who they've lost to. Atlanta twice, which obviously isn't good for their chances of winning the division, but then Baltimore and Denver, some pretty good teams. And who have they beaten? New Orleans, who's not good, but then also Philly, Detroit, and Washington. Those are some pretty good teams that they've beat.
Yeah, It's really going to be close between these two. They already played both of their games. I believe the Falcons took both of them,
Yeah, they did. Which obviously hurts for tiebreaker, right? They have to pass them now.
which they can do. Again, I don't know how much you should trust the Falcons.
Yeah, but then also like we're recording this before that Monday night game. If they lose to the Chiefs, then they're a full couple games back in that division.
Yes, they really do have to beat the Chiefs to keep any sort of competitiveness alive in that
Yeah.
division.
In the NFC North, this is officially the Lions' division to lose.
Yes.
The other teams in the division, the Vikings have really impressed so far. The Packers have looked like a very good football team. The Bears have looked better than I thought they would. Bit of a setback Sunday against the Cardinals, but they've looked like a good team. This is the best division in football, let's be clear on that, but it's the Lions who are, to me at least at the moment, way out in front. And that's shown when they've played each other. The NFC East, is this the Commanders' division to lose, or do the Eagles have a chance?
Well, okay, first of all, how about them Cowboys?
Yeah, it's are the Cowboys going to finish worse than the Giants? Is there a chance of
I
that?
am desperately hoping that happens.
They did beat the Giants once already, but look, they're still winless at Jerry World, and they still play Washington twice more. They still play Philly twice more. They have a game against Houston. This is a bad team.
Yes. And I don't think they're going to be getting any better soon.
No. As for the Commanders and the Eagles, what do you make of that division battle?
I really like this Washington team, but I don't know how much I trust them.
That's
If you,
fair.
but if they keep doing what they're doing, I see no reason why they can't just roll this division.
Yeah, do you
Because
trust the Eagles late in the year
again,
after their collapse last year, though?
it's a question of do you trust a rookie quarterback or do you trust Nick Sirianni? And my answer right now is kind of neither, but one of them has to win.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go to the AFC. As of this recording, the Chiefs are still undefeated. Make of that what you
Yes.
will.
Well, they're undefeated despite not looking very good.
Yeah, exactly. The Raiders are a disaster.
Yeah, not to be mean to them, but it's the Raiders. Are you surprised?
No. And then Broncos and the Chargers are they've both shown flashes of being good and flashes of really not.
Yep, just
Um
pretty much.
AFC South, this as we expected at the beginning of the year, is the Texans division to lose here, and they made an attempt to. They lost to the Jets, but it's still their division to lose. Indianapolis is fine. Tennessee and Jacksonville are both the worst of the worst. I don't think there's that much to say. There's a lot of bad teams, Charlie. I'm just realizing around the
Yeah,
league.
Jacksonville had hope for about 5 seconds, and then in
Yeah.
2 years ago they had hope for about 5 seconds, and then it went away. Never
There's
again.
like a tier of like a dozen teams that are just awful.
Yes. Oh, hey, Colin. By the way, just one thing for you, real quick, that
Yeah.
I wanted to mention. It's kind of not really in anywhere. If anything, would guess fit in world events because it's not inherently political.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the squirrel?
No, I really don't want to talk about the
Okay,
squirrel.
we'll talk about the squirrel next week.
Sure. We'll do that. AFC North, Pittsburgh and Baltimore at the top, Cincinnati lagging behind. The Browns are a mess. They're focused on next year to be honest.
Well, the
Although,
Browns were a mess, and then became even more of a mess, and then completely imploded.
yeah. Does Cincy still have a chance at the playoffs? We've heard what Burrows said on this.
No,
Are you sure?
maybe I don't know. It is a confusing question because they very well could be, but I could also just see them immediately having a bunch of injuries and losing a bunch of games.
It's not an especially easy schedule either.
No, it really isn't.
I mean, Dallas is one of their easiest games. I'd argue their second easiest game the rest of the way. The rest of the way. It's not easy for them. As for the at the top of the division, is Russell Wilson going to look like the Russell Wilson we saw last week on Sunday Night Football? Because if so, this Steelers team is going a long way.
Yes, and this Steelers team, I actually really like the Steelers team. Not only because it's got Russell Wilson on it. It'd be cool if he could win another Super Bowl, but it would be a redemption arc for both him and Justin Fields.
Yeah. Um, Charlie, then in the AFC East, it's the Bills, then 50 feet of garbage, and then everybody else. To tell
Well,
you everything you need to know about this division, the New York Jets are in second place.
well, no, you're not quite. It's the Bills, 50 feet of garbage, the Dolphins with Tua, 50 more feet of garbage, the Patriots and the Jets, 50 more feet of garbage, then the Dolphins without Tua.
That's fair. Um, Tua did look decent against the Bills. I that's why I could see the Dolphins moving up the standings a little bit, but they still got a ways to go. Like they're not competing for a playoff spot. Does Tua stay healthy the rest of the year? Who knows? But the Bills could clinch that division in the month of November.
They really could, and I think that just goes to show how much of a disaster that division is. Every year, they say, okay, Miami's going to challenge Buffalo. Okay, here come the Jets finally. Okay, can the Patriots turn around? The answers are no, no, and no.
The Jets are not bouncing back at all until Aaron Rodgers and all the cronies are off. Moving on to college football, Charlie. As yeah, we're running up on time real quick, so we're gonna make this somewhat short. BYU. Let's start in the Big 12 because it's maybe the least complicated. BYU has a real shot at the college football playoff.
Which would be absolutely incredible.
They're 8-0, only undefeated team in this conference. But Charlie, something else that's not getting talked about is who else has a chance in this conference, especially after Iowa State and Kansas State both lost this week?
Who?
The Colorado Buffaloes.
Oh, yeah, you're
Tied
right.
tied for second place in the conference at the moment. They don't have a ton of tough games left. They could win out in the conference. They'd probably play for a Big 12 championship and a spot in the playoff.
How unfortunate would that be?
Very. Let's talk about the Atlantic Coast Conference. Clemson now losing a conference game badly. Miami keeps getting bailed out, but they are an actually good team. Charlie, the surprise for me in this conference? Southern Methodist University.
It's not Florida State?
Oh, sorry. I was talking about surprises in a good way.
Oh, okay, yeah. SMU then.
Yeah. If we're talking about surprises in a bad way, yeah, Florida State exists.
Do
And
they? Do they
barely.
really?
So Charlie, I think what we're gonna do on next week's episode is I am going to rank the top 10 power conference coaches in college football that should be fired.
And I'm assuming,
Because,
that I think you told this to me. One of the rules is that the coach cannot be in their first year.
yeah, can't be a first year coach. Talk about that more next week, but bring this up because I have at times been accused for being too quick to call for a coach's job. But this is one that I feel very comfortable in calling. Was Mike Norvell's job. This is a disaster class. You went from 13-1, 13-0 before all your players opted out of a bowl game, to 1-8. 1-8. That's a real stat.
I don't think they ever recovered from that Georgia game.
No, I don't think they did. I almost don't have words for how bad this team is. Charlie, one thing that is interesting is going into next week. Boston College, whose quarterback Thomas Castellanos, they are playing on the CW network next week. The person announcing that game, Tom Brenneman, who will get to call a player named Castellanos.
Uh-oh.
I wonder if he's going to accidentally say a gay slur on air again.
I also wonder if somehow we're going to get a home run.
Yeah. Charlie, let's talk about the Big Ten. There's the chaotic possibilities, and then
Indiana.
there's also just the straightforward possibility. What if Oregon and Indiana both win out, then they face off in the Big Ten championship? Here's why that's not likely. Indiana's beaten no one. Absolutely no one. And they play Ohio State in a couple weeks.
Yeah, okay, so Indiana this year, they beat Washington. Who else have they beaten?
Their wins are against Michigan State, Washington, Nebraska,
Nebraska.
Northwestern, Maryland, Charlotte, UCLA, Florida International, I think it is, in Western Illinois.
Okay,
So
then.
yeah, they're not
That's
great. I mean, well,
not
they are.
great.
They've looked great. Their opponents are not great.
Yes, meanwhile, Oregon has
has faced
beaten
tests.
Michigan decisively, Illinois, Purdue, Ohio State, Michigan State, UCLA, Oregon State, Boise State, who was looking really good.
They're going to be the group of five bid.
Boise State is?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, they will.
Let's talk about Ohio State and Penn State while we're at it, because they played this weekend. Charlie, this is every year the one important game for Penn State, the one that they have to win. And
They
James
also play
Franklin,
Michigan. They also play Michigan.
not this year, but most years they do. They couldn't win this one. Again, James Franklin cannot win big games,
No, we can't.
especially against Ohio State. Look, there's the same type of narrative for Ryan Day at Ohio State, and I'll agree with that. He also often can't win big games. But when Penn State, when your entire season comes down to a game or two when you can't, that's a problem.
Yes. Yes, it is.
And
And
they were up 10-0 this weekend.
Can I guess that he's someone on your list for next week?
You're probably going to be right on that. To be honest, Ryan Day might also be on there. We'll see. Washington, Charlie, is probably going to make a bowl game, but is very bad. Michigan is very bad. It's kind of disappointing, honestly, from the two teams that played for a national championship, though not completely expected.
Yeah. The entirety of the team, basically, for Washington left. A good chunk of Michigan's team left. This was
Yeah.
expected.
Then do you remember when we had 4-0 Rutgers and we were looking at them and we're like, look, the best team on their schedule is USC. They don't play Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, or Michigan this year. This could be a team that ends up like 10-2, 11-1 or something. They're now 4-4 after losses to Nebraska, Wisconsin, UCLA, and USC.
Well, that's just how it goes.
Yep. And then let's talk about the conference where, Charlie, I think it just means more. There's not an undefeated team left in the SEC.
No, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, now I think we're in what we call the max chaos scenario.
Good. I love when the chaos hits the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, 5 teams at the moment with one loss. There's a lot of teams in this conference you can ignore. Mississippi State, Kentucky, Auburn, Oklahoma's been awful this year. But then there's teams like there's that whole middle of the pack. There's Alabama, Ole Miss, Vanderbilt's been really impressive.
Vandy
There's
is ranked.
there's the
Show you how much
Missouri.
chaos we've had. Vandy is ranked.
Yeah, Missouri's been somewhat of a disappointment. Ole Miss is definitely a disappointment. South Carolina's been fine, kind of I think what I expected. But then as for who's been a surprise, A&M has actually been a surprise for me. To see them at 5-1 at the moment, that only loss being to Notre Dame, that's actually surprising to me.
Yeah, they've looked great. And actually, if the standings hold, they are set to play Georgia for the conference championship.
At the moment, yes, but again, things will change. A&M, they still have a game left against Texas, right? Georgia plays Tennessee in a couple of weeks. They play Ole Miss this week, right? There are good games up and down this conference for the next few weeks through the end of the year.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. But, like, I want to talk about Florida real quick. What happened?
I mean, their schedule's impossible. Like, should Billy Napier lose his job? Yeah, probably, but the schedule hasn't exactly been easy.
It really hasn't. But also, real quick, Vandy's going to a bowl game.
That's pretty cool.
That is awesome, and I wish them luck unless they're playing Washington.
Yeah. For the first time this year, let's talk about the NHL, Charlie.
Yep.
If you're wondering why we don't talk about it as much, it's because it's probably the sport that we know the least about. But
also, our team decided to be bad again.
Yeah, the Kraken aren't great. Which is fine. Florida looks like they have a real shot, Charlie, at defending their title.
Yeah, they do. They are currently the best team in the Eastern Conference. Not quite the best team in the league. The best team in the league right now would be Winnipeg.
Yeah, Winnipeg has been a revelation.
Is on fire. Also notable, Utah off to a decent start. I believe if the season ended today, they would be in the playoffs.
Yeah. You know who struggled, though, so far is Edmonton. It somewhat surprised me. Vancouver's been decent, but not amazing so far. So
New York's still up there. Washington's still up there. Ovechkin is still continuing his
Yeah,
tear through the league.
Carolina's up there. They're I know we don't sound intelligent talking about this. That's because we're not, especially when it comes to hockey.
All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
Basketball. We know a lot more about that, don't we? I would hope.
Yeah, no, we definitely do. You mentioned it in the stat of the week as the undefeated teams. The Thunder, I mean, I'm hoping that they can blow it in the playoffs, but you're gonna have a tough time telling me that they're not the best team in the league.
The Thunder look incredible. I mean, they look great. Phoenix has looked decent, but can they
Yeah.
keep it going? Golden State again has looked really good. Can they keep it going?
Golden State might be the worst 5-1 team I've seen.
Oh, absolutely. And then towards the bottom of the league, towards the bottom of the West, no surprise, Utah bad, Portland
Portland.
really bad. But there has been a couple surprises. The Clippers haven't looked great. Denver hasn't looked all that inspiring so far either.
No, they've been a disappointment to me so far this year. San Antonio's
Obviously,
been
so much
fine.
time to turn this around, and these standings are gonna go all over the place. I mean, the Bulls are the fifth seed right now.
Yeah, I don't see that staying. I see Charlotte still missing the play-in, Charlie.
We're tied. We're tied for the last seed right now.
Yeah. You
I
know
also
who's
don't.
the worst in the East right now, though?
It's Milwaukee followed by Philly.
Yeah, so look, Doc Rivers maybe shouldn't be coaching in the NBA at the moment, just a thought.
No, really?
Yeah. With Philly, wasn't there that Joel Embiid locker room incident a day or two
Yes, I
ago?
don't actually exactly know what was going on with that, but yeah, apparently there was some physical altercation between him and a reporter.
That's not okay.
No, apparently the reporter said something that was really not cool, but you can't be punching a reporter like that.
No, you can't under really any any situation. Boston still looks like a team that could defend their title. They really do.
Yeah,
And
their only loss is to Cleveland, who hasn't lost. I mean, top of the East is basically, is what we expected. Boston's
yeah,
up there, New
I will
York's
say
up there.
I'm heartbroken that for Orlando, this is a team that I had high expectations for this year.
Paolo is out for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
And just for us in Seattle too, just looking at he and Kevin Durant are two of the main advocates for Seattle for in the NBA. To lose one of them like that is really unfortunate. Hopefully, we can get he can come back playing in about 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, well, the other thing that we don't mention about the Magic for us in Seattle is like they're not just fun to root for because of Paolo. Jalen Suggs is on that team too.
Yes, he is.
The standout at Gonzaga, who obviously hit that iconic shot in the Final Four, and he's been he's been playing pretty well too. So
Yeah, and just a couple of the teams that we haven't talked about yet, but just a couple thoughts. Minnesota hasn't looked again all that inspiring.
I'm not surprised you now have Julius Randle on your team instead of Karl Anthony Towns.
Yeah.
That to me is a mistake.
Spurs haven't looked awful.
No, they haven't looked awful. My question is, who's gonna help that team besides Wemby?
Chris Paul? Question mark.
Maybe, but probably not.
Yeah, they do really need a piece.
Yeah,
And
again,
looking at
I don't think it's necessarily just a bad strategy to just wait until Wemby is like a top 5 player in the league because that's
is
coming,
is he not
and
already?
he could be. I don't think he's quite there yet, but wait until he's just like absolutely dominating everybody and then go and get the star. But I think that's coming sooner than the Spurs maybe think it is.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this team. This team is not ready to compete. They have Harrison Barnes, Trey Jones,
Yeah,
Devin Vassell, Zack Collins. It's basically a bunch of bench caliber players, and then Wemby and maybe like one or two decent players.
exactly. Any other comments on the NBA before we move on?
Yes, I have two more teams that I would like to talk about. Well, it's actually three. Sorry, one of them being I am confused with the Lakers. Is this team good? Is this team not? What's going on?
I don't know.
They're an enigma.
It's
They are
too early to say, I think.
they are uniquely weird. Also, Memphis has looked pretty good.
I guess.
And last thing to mention is if we could freeze the playoff field right now, we would have an Eastern play-in of Atlanta, Brooklyn, Washington, and Indiana.
That is would be hilarious to be completely honest.
Yes,
Um
and just a last thing to note on the current Cooper Flag sweepstakes. Utah is leading at 6-0, followed by Milwaukee at 1-5, and Portland at 2-5.
Charlie, but you know Detroit's going to end up with the worst record in the league and get the 5 pick again.
Yeah, they're gonna get the 5th pick again, and although I would not be surprised if Portland gets the first pick and bumbles it somehow.
Yep. All right. Charlie, how about you close the show with F1?
Yeah, why not? So, do we have a championship fight on our hands? Not anymore, because Brazil decided to be incredibly weird, as it sometimes can be. Max Verstappen gets a win from 17th on the grid.
Charlie, am I seeing that an Alpine driver ended up finishing second?
Yes, Alpine
And
gets
third.
2-3. Gets a 2-3. They jump up from 9th to 6th in the standings. Nico Hulkenberg gets disqualified for being pushed back on the track. Alex Albon crashed out. Both of the Williams did, in fact. Sainz crashes out into the wall. And even better, Lance Stroll crashes out on the formation lap. Also, just some notable things. Tsunoda and Lawson both scoring points. Sergio Perez misses on the points again. Gets beaten by both of the junior Red Bull team, who finishes 7th and 9th with Lawson and Tsunoda. 6th place for Lando Norris after he slid off the track from starting from pole. Yes, you heard me right. Verstappen won the race from 17th, and Norris finished 6th from 1st. So is the championship over with 3 races to go? Yes. Is it mathematically over? No, but is it over? Yes, it is. And I will say for sure that we will basically never see a race like this again.
Would you say, though, that the Constructors' Championship also over in favor of McLaren?
No, absolutely not. The Ferraris are still absolutely in it.
They have leapfrogged Red Bull. So Red Bull's down to 3rd now in Constructors.
Yes. So the Constructors' Championship is going to come down to Ferrari and McLaren. It is a just under 40-point gap. But given McLaren's, ability to implode, it is possible. Ferrari just has to have a couple good results. Admittedly, though, trusting Ferrari to do anything is probably a bad idea. But yeah, we're gonna have some great races in the constructors coming down to the end of the season here. Battle for first. We also have a great battle for 6th. Alpine has 49 points there in 6th. Haas 3 points behind them. Racing Bulls only 2 points behind them. 5 points separating that entire group of 3. With 3 races and 2 sprints to go, 3 races, 1 sprint to go. It's going to be a great end of the season for Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi. And with that, Colin, lead us out.
Yep, we've got to sign off into what's sure to be a very stressful election day, and next couple of weeks, whatever happens on the other side, we'll be here to talk about it. We'll be live Wednesday morning. You can obviously look at the C&C Talks Twitter account at C&C Talks Podcast for ongoing coverage of the election all through election night. But above all else, if you have not already, vote. That's going to do it for this episode of C&C Talks. Make sure to subscribe. Episodes weekly wherever you listen to your podcast. Our website, cctalks.com, has everything you need to know about the show. You can 360-389-2630. Again, that's 360-389-2630. As I alluded to, you can follow us on Twitter at C&C Talks Podcast. Follow Charlie at C&C Talks Charlie. Join our Discord server at cctalks.com/Discord. All of this information and more is in the description below. But for now, for our producer Morris, production designer Zack, I'm Colin.
I'm Charlie, and we'll see you